Metropolitan. And she's ready to chat with us about a series she's editing on Fast, Fierce Women, or Fast Women. So the latest book is Fast, Fierce Women, 75 Essays on Flash Nonfiction. And one of those essays was written by Georgia. So again, after Gina's conversation with Georgia and Elsie's through, we're going to open the floor to all of you. So just hang on to anything you'd like to say. And in the meantime, please do make sure that you're muted so that we can, focus on what Gina and Georgia and Elsie are chatting about. So I'm going to waste no more time in passing the mic over to Gina to tell us about her latest work. So Gina, floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. And we have, not only am I delighted to see Georgia and Elsie here, but there are a number of other contributors to the book that we've got. We've got Laura Rossi is here, Pierre Bertucci is here, and Eve Emerson is here, so that we have a lot of contributors. So it's not just going to be asking the questions of Georgia as somebody who stepped up and wrote a fierce essay for the book, but we have a lot of them, and my old friends Anita and Sid Hollick are here. And so the connection that I have to Georgia goes back many layers and many years. Georgia, I keep all my emails. I'm a hoarder in some ways, and my office, which is my home office, what you're seeing in the background, is it is an indication only of what goes on inside my head. The rest of my house, as friends can vouch for, is very sort of neat and tidy and classic New England. And my own space looks like a cross between a toy store and a bodega, because I need to have all of the stuff around me. But I keep all my old emails, and because I don't understand how any of the technology works, and so I just do. And so I looked up the first one that I had from Georgia, which was from 2011. And Georgia, isn't that when you opened the bookstore?
Yeah, I opened the bookstore March 1, 2011. And I think you were one of the first authors who came. I think you did something at the Women's Resource Center.
And that was through Anita Hollick. And so I didn't realize, I knew the bookstore had been new, but I didn't realize that I was really like one of the first who had been there. And that gave me, it's like a whole new sort of context and reference point, because now Georgia, everybody knows Georgia, and I'm going to assume, and everybody knows that she is the light of every room and that she brings in new ideas, but that you also know that, like a lot of us, has done a whole bunch of different things. And so that Georgia you were in technology for a while, right? But
no, I worked for IBM. I was a systems engineer. Can you believe that?
No, I can't actually. It is, because I remember talking to you, because it was like women who have come out of, other fields entirely, who worked in engineering, you also worked in journalism, right? You have a degree in journalism, you have the Cincinnati paper. Your life has, again, as many women's lives have, you've taken off in all directions and somehow always managed to come home. That because you've brought your home with you, and you've made whatever professional life you're in the place that you need to be right now. And one of the parts that makes you a great woman is that you've always taken other women with you, that you've made sure that it's not just you, finding a home, but that you make a place for
others. I remember her. She was so funny.
That's good, Marcy. I can hear you. So that's good. I'm so glad. I'm just glad.
Oh my God.
That moron, because you never know what comes out of somebody's mouth when they.
I know. Oh my goodness. All right, I'll take my mood off. I'll put my mood on. Oh, that's so funny. Okay.
That's great. See, that I could pay for. We could say that we arranged that before Marcy came on. That would be very good. That's what you hope for. It would be like, oh God, look what she did to her hair. There are a lot of, things that we're afraid to say when we first, when we're unmuted and we first joined. And there's Jane Cook, who's another contributor to the book, who's just joined us. And it's great. It's just absolutely wonderful. It's so nice. And then to have actually folks that I don't know were here. But that, so Georgia, again, we also know each other through Chautauqua, right?
Yes.
Through the amazingness of Chautauqua, where when I first spoke there, I think it was in 93 or 94. It was after my first book. They used to call me Snow White, but I drifted. I found the old paperback to get out. This is the old paperback of the first book. They used to call me Snow White, but I drifted. Women's Strategic Use of Humor first came out, and I was invited to speak at Chautauqua in the big arena, in the big auditorium. And I knew, that every sitting president had spoken there, and I knew it was a big deal, but I didn't know what a rush it was going to be and how much fun it was going to be there for a few days and meet other presenters and meet the people who make Chautauqua what it is. And so, and I know that's, Sid and Anita started going, I think not long after that. And, it's just been this wonderful sort of, rolling sort of set of carnival that we've all created. But Georgia, I want to ask you a question that I don't think I've ever asked you before, which is that, did you always, like a lot of the writers who are in the book who are here now, did you always want to write since you were a kid, or were you as open as the different parts of your professional life had been? Did you always have different ideas about what you wanted to do?
Well, I've always been writing, and in fact, when I was an IBM systems engineer for about 7 years, I left that field to go back to get my master's in journalism. But I've been writing since I was a little kid, and I remember one time I had done something bad because I was not a good little girl. I was not one of those sweet little girls who sits in the front of the room, and I was told I had to write an essay as my punishment. I loved it. And I wrote an essay about how difficult it had to be a schoolroom floor. All that stuff that stinky stuff that the janitor threw on it and swept so roughly over it, and how awful that was. And I've been writing actually ever since.
So you knew from the start,
yeah,
that putting words in a certain order was going to help you make sense of the world,
right?
And I suspect, as I know that a lot of again, writers are in the room, but I expect that even some people who I don't know personally who are here are themselves emerging writers who would like to write. And so the idea of talking about writing, even as we discuss what we've written, I think is an important part of the conversation. And so finding out like what gave you permission to write, and finding out that for you, that it was done as a punishment.
Yeah, right.
It's sort of fascinating. Was that for an English class, or it was just like that?
No. I was in about second grade. I don't know what I'd done, but probably something. I remember I did one thing one time when my teacher chased me down the hall with a paddle, but he couldn't catch me. I can't remember what I did that time. Maybe that was punishment for that, could be. But
okay, that's serious. Where did you grow up, Georgia?
In Western Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah.
So paddles were a part of
oh, sure.
Sort of everyday.
Absolutely, with holes cut in them to make them sting more.
Oh wow. Okay. No, I was shamed and humiliated in school, although not always by the teachers. The teachers sort of rescued me. But it was, and I wasn't one of those good little girls either. But the trouble is that I wanted to be. I just didn't know how to do it. It was just not how you survived in my family. It was not by being nice. It was by being quick and funny and speaking up and being, a presence, because otherwise with the immediate family of 110, you couldn't get a lot of attention. And so a lot of my stories and a lot of, what the 10 books that I've written over time are about, again, particularly women, girls, women, old ladies, trying to find our voices in the world. And I think that changes over time. But if you learned how to find your voice early, it only gets easier. It's taken a lot of folks a lot longer as I've discovered, to do that. So Georgia, when I asked you to write for Fast, Fierce Women, you were sort of all in, but a little tentative too, because we had to discuss what fierce meant. So I'll talk a little bit about before I'm going to ask you to read from your essay. But the first book that I did for Woodhull Press was one that the Sarasota One bookstore did a wonderful event with last year, but also one of my favorite parts was that you did the chalk drawing.
That's Elsie's husband who does those drawings.
That was, I don't know if you did one for Fast, Fierce Women. I gotta say, no.
Have Tony do one for you.
I would love it, because
Yeah.
that would be amazing. Because for this one, because I sent it to the illustrator who did the cover of this now, and that happens to be Mimi Pond. And Mimi Pond is a best-selling graphic artist who was on the New York Times bestseller list for her book about being a waitress, in her term, in Haight-Ashbury in the late 60s, called Over Easy. And so Mimi has a wonderful essay in this book, actually about fabric. It's just brilliant. But she agreed to do the cover. So as you'll see, it's this sort of it's the Medusa head, the creative figure with all of these different sort of diverse kinds of women emerging from her. So with fast, funny women in her crown. So New York Times best-selling graphic artist as the first one of these. And then with Fast, Fierce Women, as you have right up there, was done by a recent graduate from UConn, who came up with the design. And again, a wonderfully diverse group of characters, and her name is Miranda Wright, and she's in the book, so I know she would love. Mimi loved seeing the chalk representation, and I think Anita and Sid sent me a photograph of it on the sidewalk, the nice triangle, the board that was up there. But I know that this young woman who was just getting started as an illustrator would be thrilled to think that she was there. And one of the nice thing about the books that I started out with Fast, Funny Women was that I thought it was going to be a one-off. Woodhull Press is an independent press based in Connecticut. And actually it was started, one of the three men who started it was a former student of mine, and who also went and got his MFA and got, a degree after doing a bunch of other things, and Dave Legere. And he came into my office. I've been teaching at the University of Connecticut since 1987. So it's been a while since the earth crust cooled. And I stay in touch with my former students. I'm very happy. There are a couple of them right here. There's Neve Emerson, who's also a writer for the book, Laura Rossi, who is another author, and a publicist. And Laura I had in one of the first classes I ever taught at UConn. But Dave came back after like 10 years, brought coffee. That's what they have to do to gain entrance into my office, which is in the basement next to the toilets and the vending machines. That's when you're a distinguished professor, as I am. I'm a board of trustees distinguished professor. You're next to the toilet and where they get the candy bars. So he came in and he said, would you be willing to do a collection with this new press? And I was like, sure. I'm thinking this will be very nice. I'll do this kid a favor. Turns out the book did incredibly well. I mean, Laura, as a publicist, gets everything out there. It sold, it got wonderful reviews. And the nice, you remember like the children's book Stone Soup, where you ask, right? And so I asked, I've been around this writer's block for a long time. And so I asked friends of mine. I asked Jane Smiley, the Pulitzer Prize winner for American literature of, 1,000 Acres and Moo. And I said, Jane, would you write a 750-word essay for Fast, Funny Woman? And she's actually hilarious. And she was like, yeah. So Jane Smiley's in here. Marge Piercy, Woman at the Edge of Time, one of the great American poets. Marge Piercy wrote something for the book. Faye Weldon, Life and Loves of a She-Devil, wrote something about what it was like to be interviewed by everybody in her heyday. as this writer. Darian Huzi, who wrote Friendship Bread, big bestseller, is now writing poetry. Asian Pacific writer who's absolutely brilliant and one of the women who is made good in all kinds of places. Mimi Pond, Liza Donnelly, who is a staff cartoonist for The New Yorker, another absolutely brilliant woman. Nicole Hollander, who did the Sylvia cartoons. Eileen Beckerman, who did Life, Love, and What I Wore, which Nora Ephron made into that stage play. It's great. So they all said yes. And then it becomes easier to do the next one, so that I get people like Georgia Court and Jane Cook and Eve Emerson, who's actually also in the first one, but we get people to sign up. And so there are, playwright Beth Blatt is in this, Maureen Corrigan, who's Fresh Air's book critic. She's the big book critic for NPR. You listen to her all the time. Maureen Corrigan is in here, best-selling New York Times author Carolyn Levitt. But in a way, the people that I'm proudest of who are in here are the writers of all different ages and from all different backgrounds, who might not have had access to getting their works inside a book with an ISBN. A lot of these have been writers who have been either they're brand new to the scene, or they've been writing for years but have never found a place to get published, or they've self-published, but they've never been in the kind of company where they can be showcased with other really marvelous writers and be in conversation with other writers in the collection. And so the book that's coming out next year, should all get ready, pre-order from Sarasota One Bookstore, is Fast Fallen Women.
Oh, no. Whoa.
Yeah. So
because you asked me to write for that one, Gina.
Yeah, that this is. But it's really, and the idea of also now I just have to keep coming up with F words that bookstores can actually keep on the shelves, because there are a few that we'll have to, but and so it's just been fabulous because people come at it from very different angles and with wildly different approaches to the subject. So when I said fierce, and again, just to give you a sense, I'll just say that fierce can be getting out of bed. It can be taking a shower. It can be switching to job or going to see a shrink or going to war or getting out of a relationship that could kill you. It can be crossing your arms against your chest or opening them up in an embrace. That fierce is anything. And I think what a lot of the writers for the book and what I've heard from the readers of the collection is that they've discovered that by redefining fierce, they understand just how fierce they are. And that to actually grow up as a woman in the world who keeps her integrity and keeps her personality intact, her sense of humor together, and is able to deal with other human beings, you have to be pretty fierce to do that on a day-to-day basis. And you need to give yourself credit for it. So Georgia, can you tell us how you decided? Because Georgia's is very, it's again, very funny, very daring. And it's about the Karen factor. So how did you decide?
Well, I was having a conversation with my son, and he's 33, and he's a writer himself, by the way, very accomplished writer. And we were, and there's a big age difference. And we were just talking about some of the terms that are out there in the world right now. And Karen was one. I knew it wasn't a good thing, but I really didn't know what it was. And he explained it to me. And I looked at him and I said, Andrew, oh my God, I think I'm a Karen. Should I write about that? Because you had just invited me at that point. And he said, well, I don't know. It's not such a good thing to be. But what the heck? I said, I'll write about it. It's what I'm not proud of it.
Right.
But it's what I am. So.
But this is so, I mean, again, it's very funny. And I love the first line. Please read us. Choose the parts you want to read, but it's a short piece. So if you want to read the whole thing. I
can read the whole thing. It's not very long. Yeah, those of you out there, don't worry. I'm not
get scared.
War and Peace or anything like that. It's called I May Be a Karen. I may be a Karen, but at least I'm cool. I used to worry about not getting it. Recently, I was worried about whether I might be a Karen. after my son explained what it meant. I was horrified to realize that I actually am a Karen. Yikes. I thought Karen was simply the name of a rather nice woman I know, a poetry teacher who lives in a place in the north where I spend my summers, and I have at least learned not to use summer as a verb. So the word conjures up pleasant images of cool breezes on shady porches, but no, it turns out that a Karen is what I am. My son explained that a Karen is a boomer, guilty. She's a white woman who believes the world cannot spin properly without her judgmental advice, and that advice usually comes in the form of a whining complaint. Oh dear, guilty. If I were to die now in some horrific accident, like if someone tired of hearing me complain pushed me off an 11th floor condo balcony, I know what I'd see flash before my eyes on my way down to splat on the sidewalk. I'd see all those times I wailed about the installation of parking meters in our town. Imagine putting them right on the street in front of my favorite store. And what about that favorite store? How many times has the proprietor heard me fuss about the clothing she carries? She can't ever seem to figure out which party attire I want. Don't you agree the cocktail dresses are cut too low at the top and too tight in derriere? Well, surely that's something worthy of a hearty complaint. Now I know I was being a Karen. Am I going to be subjected to reliving that revelation on the way to the great beyond? I won't even go into my memories about insisting waiters move me from table to table in my quest to find the best view out the window, the least drafty seat away from an air vent, or the quietest spot far removed from the jazz quintet. But maybe more important than whether I am a Karen, I worried if I was woke. I thought I was. I thought I had plenty of empathy, thought I kept up with the times, thought I knew what side to be on, regardless of which protest march was happening in town. But I now know the concept of woke includes the idea of buy-in, and that it's not enough to show up to march with my friends and hold up a sign with a slogan. So since I'm not really ready to completely buy into everybody else's reality, I guess I'll skip that and focus on buying into my own reality. My own reality, the way I see it, is that I am the coolest person I know. Acknowledging that, even using the word cool hopelessly dates me. Why am I so cool? Because I own a bookstore. It's a happy place for me since I love books, and I think it's a happy place for my customers as well. I opened a bookstore because there wasn't an indie in my town, and I simply wanted it for me. Nobody was stepping up to give me a bookstore, so I gave myself one. Now, much to my amazement and delight, books are like the coolest things out there. Ads feature gorgeous models with book in hand, any brand enhanced by the notion that people with both beauty and brains love whatever the advertiser is selling. Well, that's something I can buy into. I'm fully woke to the pleasure of books. And while I'm immersed in a good novel, who cares what the 20-something down the street calls me? And I have to say that owning a bookstore is really cool, and particularly cool that my good friend and bookstore seller extraordinaire and the soul of the bookstore, Elsie Souza, is part of this bookstore.
So I want to tell you too, I'm going to get a word in edgewise, because what I would say to the two of you, you are not shrinking violets, as you know. Now, I was brought up in a large Portuguese household, so I have 135 million cousins, and we all got together for dinner or whatever. But I went to parochial school and was the oldest child, so I sat there very nicely. So I admire the two. for what you've been able to carry on. But I want just to preface this by saying that I thought about this, and we'll get to questions for the two of you, but I thought the fast, fierce women I'm admiring right now are the women of Ukraine who are going across the borders with their little kids and having to tell fairy tales to them when life is a nightmare. And the second thing is, and this is for you, Gina, the women of UConn play Stanford tonight. So I'm hoping that UConn goes on to win the NCAA, and I'm sure you're rooting too for that.
You're on mute, Gina.
Unmute. Okay. Yes, I am hoping for the best, although I have never had a basketball player of any gender or a football player of any gender in my classes. So when people say, you know, I root by proxy. So I'm very happy for them. One day before I retire, I will have somebody in my class, and I have wonderful athletes. Neve was a track and field star. Nyanka J, who's in the book, both in the first and second book, also a track and field star. I've got lots of both young men and young women who have been through my classes, who have been terrific athletes. But I think that those teams that get all this TV exposure and all this dough are worked so hard and tutored so specially because their schedules are so disrupted that they just can't be in regular classes. But one of the fun things is that for this year, they did a public service announcement, and I'm in it. And so if they make it, I will. So I am sitting one of the definitions of power by one of the people that I make my students write down at the beginning of classes is that power is the ability not to have to please. Right? That a great definition of power. Power is the ability not to have to please. And that, so after certain points in life, you reach up, it's like, no, we'll do it my way. Thanks, but we're going to do this my way. So when the people putting together for the foundation, whatever for UConn said, would you be in this? I'm the one academic who has her own card in the show. And they said, would you stand in front of like Gamble Pavilion or in front of the dog, the husky that represents UConn? And I said, no, if you want to shoot this one, do it in my office. You come to my office in the basement and da. And they said, would you sing the song? And I said, no, I can't sing. I have no talent. I can't carry a tune. I will say the words. So we did the 14,000 takes where I just say the phrase over and over again, and a symbol of might to the foe. And I say it as if I'm teaching a piece of poetry, but they put like a drum beat underneath it. So apparently it's sort of, I haven't seen it, but it sounds like I'm singing. And the office at work just looks the same thing as the office here. It's a lot of bright colors and dolls and Barbies and whatever, and art by students. And so if it keeps going, then I'll keep getting calls from students that I've had for 35 years going, I just saw you. You look like Cruella de Vil, which is what I'm hearing now. And I'm thinking that's as close as I'm going to get to looking like Glenn Close in any iteration. So I'm taking it. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. I don't have a problem with
Let me ask the two of you. Obviously, you edited the book and we read it. What surprised you most about the women who wrote the book? Was there anything that surprised either one of you? I mean, I was surprised that Georgia was Karen.
Yeah, right.
What did I know?
You didn't know it was a Karen?
Well, I guess I did.
But it's a great question because it really was how people define themselves. So that again, Jane, I know is there. There's Jane, and Jane writes about her essay is called "Writing Saved Me." And Jane, I'm just going to read for you. That's okay. Jane is sitting there, and she starts. It was 1972, and I was just out of college with a BA in English and a secondary English teaching certificate. I was eager to start my career, but there were no middle or high school jobs to be had. Still, the landlord wouldn't wait for the rent, and I needed to eat and pay the electricity and phone bills. So I set off to find any job I could. There are an astonishing number of women who are writing about finding work and then discovering the problems, as Jane's essay goes on to explain, that when you secure that job, then you have to deal with the reality of the people that you have to work with. And that was not always easy. So we've got Jane telling the story about the sort of the haunting of the figure who did everything that he could to sort of get in her way and destroy her dreams and make life difficult. And Jane, of course, is triumphant. And that's what the ferocity comes in. It's like triumphing over the thing you thought could get in your way forever. Laura Rossi writes a really poignant, it's a really important piece about homeschooling. One of her children, a special needs son, it was like, I need special education. I need everybody to help me do this work. I mean, like realizing how much you depend on a community of people to help you. And Neve Emerson writes in this book, it was an earlier, it was a piece that I had sort of came out of a conversation where Neve was changing her name at her beautiful wedding in 2015, right? And I said, so Neve, you're gonna change your name. Like I always knew her as Neve Cunningham. And this was, she had the wonderful line, and she ends with the idea that you can take the Cunningham out of a girl's name, but you can never take the Cunningham out of the girl. But she says that, and she's the mother of 3, of a girl and then 2 twin boys. She works at Yale. She works her tail off and her heart out, and she's brilliant and she's a terrific writer. But that she says, where's the line? That it's the, the women in my family take our men and then we take their name. And that's a very different way of looking at the taking of somebody's name as an act of possession.
Right.
Of not being taken by them.
Right.
Not being swept off the feet, but I'm taking your name. I'm now taking your clan. This is who I am. And Neve, has always been somebody to take the phrase, and so many of the phrases that we grow up hearing or telling ourselves or hearing from the world about how the best way to live life need to be turned around. And it's just what Georgia did, but that we need to, turn those around. One of the things that makes me really proud, I don't have it next to me, so I'm clearly not that proud of it, but those, I hope you have them in the bookstore, those quotable cards, you see them everywhere. They're the black square cards with the lines on them. That Quotable a few years ago wrote and asked permission to do quotable cards and magnets and cups with one line from an earlier book of mine called It's Not That I'm Bitter, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About Visible Panty Lines and Conquer the World. And it's about, one of the essays was about turning ideas around. And one of those ideas was, I said, it's not, I had done the introduction to Anita Luce's A Gentleman Prefer Blondes. And I realized that what Luce teaches us in the book, not so much in the movie, but in the book, is that it's not that diamonds are a girl's best friend, but it's your best friends who are your diamonds.
Mhm.
It's your best friends who are made under pressure, who are worth $1 million and who are strong enough to scratch glass if you need them to, that they are irreplaceable, and that you never ask, is this a real friend? Because it's either real or it's not. I mean,
Well, Gina, I have a couple of them on this call. I noticed come in. Nancy DeVita is here. Karma Lloyd is here. Linda Allen is here. If I've missed others, if you come in, I apologize, but I happen to see them sign in, and I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that is, so it's your best friends who are your diamonds. And so that line made it into quotable. So, but it's taking a familiar idea and turning it around so that it becomes what the real truth of it is. So, You know, it's the real stuff. And so that's what I've enjoyed. And so when, you know, and looking for the essays, and again, hoping we sell enough books that the series will continue, and that we'll be able to get new writers in, and that we'll be able to get underrepresented writers in there, and again, have everybody working together to sort of make this stone soup of books come out.
So for the two of you, who did you think of in your personal life were fast, fierce women?
Fast, fierce women. In my life, I think about my grandmother, who I hadn't thought about. Elsie had not prompted me with this question. But my grandmother, who was an immigrant, and she raised 6 children after her husband was killed in an accident, actually when the youngest, my mother, was just 4. So she was a woman who spoke very little English, at least at that time. Later on, she did. And this is part of it was during Prohibition. She made wine in her basement for the neighbors. She flirted with the grocery man to get more provisions for the kids, and she would tell these stories and really laugh about these stories and about raising these 6 kids all on her own. So she was a fast, fierce, wonderful woman. Yeah. How about you, Gina?
Oh, that's a wonderful story. I mean, my mother it's like the opposite of grandmother. She was very shy. She was French Canadian. She'd come down to marry my Sicilian father and live with his mother and grandmother in the big 3-story house in Brooklyn. And now we would realize that she would be diagnosed as clinically depressed. She was very sad. She felt in exile her whole life. And I think that I learned very early on sort of how to tell stories to entertain her. And so that the place I felt most safe and most at home and least like I had to perform in an interesting way was school. And I had a second grade teacher, first and second grade teacher. They put us, it was, you know, again, I'm 65, so I was born in 57. So in the early 60s, when I was first starting big public school, they were trying experimental things, like I was the beginning of the new math. So, I mean, I can't count. I mean, when people try to explain math to me, it's like teaching, you know, it was like teaching algebra to goats. I can't do it. I'm trying to figure out base 7, which is like counting on your hands if you're missing 3 fingers. You know, I can't do that. And, but Mrs. Pruitt was the first and second grade teacher. They kept us in one sort of cohort going through the early grades. And smart wasn't exactly what anybody in my family was expected to be or thought of ourselves. It just wasn't. Nobody in my family had graduated from high school. My parents were both very smart people, but they had no education. They both left school in the 8th grade to go to work like everybody else in the family did. I was the first woman in my family ever to graduate from high school in a timely fashion. And some who then later went to prison got GEDs, but that was it. So that was like an accomplishment. And some of you think I'm kidding, but and so the teacher, Mrs. Pruitt, once asked us to draw. We had to draw a big something and a little something. And other kids in the class drew a big house and a small house and a big dog and a little dog and a big cat and a little cat. And we used to go to the library all the time. Books were always part of my life. So always took out the 5 we were allowed to take from our big public library. And I had taken one out about the planets. And my brother, 6 years older than I am, and he, you know, so he was also into astronomy and all the rest of it. So I filled the page, the little, you know, 9x11 piece of paper, you know, that paper and Crayolas or whatever. So I filled the page with big and little planets. You know, with lots of little Saturns and stars, but I filled the whole page. They were all big and small. They were different sizes. And Mrs. Pruitt said, Gina, that's really good.
Oh.
And like when my mother came to pick me up after school, she said, Gina's smart. And I could see my mother looking at me in a different way because like no teacher, she'd been tortured as a child. She was, again, very unhappy. And that to have somebody say, your kid is smart, I think, it was like possessing some kind of magical power. And so I think that looking toward those teachers, and I think that's also not a surprise, that's why, I continue to teach. I never wanted to teach when I was growing up because everybody thought every girl with a big mouth should be a lawyer or a teacher. So I was like, no, I'm going to do something else. And then the first time I was in a classroom, I thought, okay, this is my vocation. I am called to do this. And I got lucky and found that, a long time ago.
I love that story. I was a teacher for 25 years.
Oh,
I know in my first career, and I love being a teacher because you change lives. There's no two ways about it. And so I admire you for what you did and for all the teachers out there. And I think during the pandemic, what we really learned about the fierce women in particular who are teachers, they hold a community together. I'm really convinced of that. And they did, and when the parents had to deal with the kids at home, I think it was a really difficult situation. But so yes, for teachers, and I love to remember my mother, who never graduated from high school, but she was the smartest woman that my sisters and I ever knew and will ever know. And she made us who we are today. So
that's great.
I know. It touches my heart. I know. But, I think for what you've done for women, it's been remarkable. In Georgia, she's been a mentor to all the young women who work in here. I mean, the fact that she has a bookstore is amazing for Sarasota. Sarasota needed Georgia, and
I needed Sarasota.
And here she is.
That's
So
made in
isn't this
heaven.
a really
Right.
good thing? I know. I love it. I love it. So I just want to ask the two of you. So how far do you think we've come as fast, fierce women? I know there's a lot of them on there who have written. So where are we going? And Gina, what do you see? And what does Georgia see too?
I'm not seeing enough.
Okay.
I had hoped for more, a bigger group, more progress, but it really is like every generation, like so much, every generation needs to learn its own stuff, that as much, maybe it's incremental, but I was teaching a terrific course on the novels of Thomas Hardy and Margaret Atwood. So it's really big, long novels that the kids read page by page. And so we're talking about Tessa the D'Urbervilles and losing her virginity and being raped or assaulted and da 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 da. And I was like, but is virginity still a thing? Like, do you grow up? So I'm asking these 18-year-old girls, these 19-year-old boys, or 20, whatever they are. And I said, we always talk about the text. I don't ask about their lives. I said, but virginity was the only currency that was being dealt in the day for a poor girl like Tess. That was the only thing she could bring as a dowry to a marriage. And I said, I was brought up that for the Catholic Church that I was raised in, you have to understand that sex was something dirty and disgusting that you save for someone you love. That was it. That was the entire definition of sex. And the idea that, I said, isn't it different now? And one girl in a very a young woman from Nicaragua, brilliant student, honor student, and she put her head down. And I know she comes from a conservative family, and again, a family that went through its own troubles to get here. She said, my mother keeps comparing women's bodies to locks.
Wow.
So if you have too many keys in the lock, it loosens the lock and then everybody can get in. It has no effect on the key though. So it's like for my brother, it's like it makes the key stronger if it goes in a lot of locks, but it wrecks the lock if you have a lot of keys. So she said, you think it's different? And it's like, not from that analogy. No, I don't think it's different. That was a new one to me. Maybe everybody else had heard this one. I had heard the plucking of the flowers and the petals and the passing around the chocolate bar that nobody wants to eat if everybody touched the chocolate bar. I had not heard about the locks. And so I was, oh my God. So.
But
yeah.
This is great.
But I love what you said about sex being something dirty.
And to sew something dirty, discussing with your
Someone
neighbor.
you love. What sort of gift is this on your wedding night?
Well, this is supposed to be with somebody who has no idea what he's doing, and something that is a sin that will drive you to hell at 10 in the morning is then a sacrament at 7 at night. I never got good answers to those questions. Like, Father Peter, how come? It's like, this is beyond your pay grade, Barreca. You don't need to ask those questions.
Why do you have to eat fish on Friday? And I'll just end with this. When we grew up, you couldn't eat fish on, you couldn't eat meat on Friday, God forbid. But
And it was God forbid.
yes, there was a Portuguese feast in New Bedford, and so it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the bishop used to give dispensation so we could eat meat, because Portuguese people, God forbid.
Yeah. It's the sausage and the shrimp, right?
Exactly, the whole nine yards. So yeah, I just want you to keep that with you. But now I think you two are incredible, but I think I'm going to call in those holics because they know the two of you better than anybody. And we'll go on to questions, I think.
Yeah. Anita or Sid, are you out there? Are you listening? Or you just tuned in and pretend like you're here? If you're there, you need to unmute and talk to us.
Anita, I sent the invitation for you to unmute yourself if you want to.
Okay, we're.
All right, here we are.
Yeah.
You have to.
You have to turn it, Anita or Sid, you have to turn off you have to turn one of your devices.
Hold on.
Sounds like you're in outer space. And I know they're not in outer space, they're just down the street from the bookstore. So,
How about that?
no, I think you're not,
Ridiculous.
you've got too much interference. If you've got two devices on, turn one of them entirely off, and then Bryn, somebody else has a question while we're waiting for them to sort that out.
Sure. Julianne, you wrote in the chat if you want to unmute yourself. Everybody can unmute themselves if you want to be able to chime in too. Now's the time.
Oh, I just wanted to say I'm a huge fan. I'm a neighbor of Georgia. She doesn't even know me. I live across the hall in the Mark, and I'm in my late 40s. And because of her, I picked up the book because it says that the bookstore owner wrote this book or a contributor to this book. And I picked it up and I was like leafing through it. And then I saw the second book and I'm leafing through it in the bookstore because it's new and it's new and it's a beautiful bookstore and it's like my happy place. I love books. And because of her, I started reading it and I went through every story and I'm crying, I'm laughing, and I'm telling my daughters about it. I'm leaving to catch a flight. And I was like, I running to get to my taxi, but I don't want to miss this because they just inspire me. All these stories were just super cool. It kind of gave like a woman injection of inspiration to, I'm a mom, so the grandmother and the mother, you got me teared up there. It just injected me with, you got to keep making your mark because moms make marks and women make marks. And so these books, just people are reading them is what I want to say. You don't know how, and you don't know how they affect you, but they're awesome. And I love it. And I'm taking them to Boston right now to my daughter.
Okay, I'm gonna, you can hear me?
Yeah.
I am so proud. And that is, and I know as a bookstore owner and a contributor to the book and people who've contributed to the book, I mean, all anybody wants, right? And I see that all we want is for people to pick up the book, but just as you said, because just when you said that, moms make marks, I mean, that that the effect that we have, the importance of what you might dismiss as, well, I just showed up that day. I thought maybe she might be lonely after she started the new school. So I thought I'll be there at lunchtime in case she wants to do half a day, or I want whatever these small, and not only as mothers, but as friends, as neighbors, as in the incidental moments, we tend to make such a big deal, and it because of the nature of our culture and all the rest of it, social media, that it's the big days where you get to dress up. It's graduation, or it's Mother's Day, or it's somebody's birthday. But the moments of life are the most, the real treasures. What we cherish are the small moments, or the sort of casual encounters where you meet somebody who then you go back and so I remember meeting you the first time. I remember. And so, Julianne, and also as a mother of daughters, as you said, that you're also influencing their friends. They're going to go back and think about you. I mean,
let me tell you, I am going to add the lock analogy to these girls this weekend. That is gold. That is gold.
It's terrible.
I loved it. My mom used to say, don't give it away for a 99-cent cheeseburger in the back of a Pinto. This is the modern one.
Well, first of all, the Pinto is so close to death. So you never want to do it. But see, but the best advice, because my mother died when I was a teenager. She died when I was 16. So my father ended up, and she'd been sick for a long time. My father ended up, having to do some of the heavy lifting in my late teenage years. And when these guys with, one headlight from their car would be going up into the trees, not the wisest choices, let's say. And at one point, one kid, because I was alone in the house, and one boy used to come and take me to school in the morning. And my father said, man of very few words, and he said, I don't like this guy coming to the house every day. And in that arch way that you do, and you talk to parents, I said, Dad, nothing is going on. And my father, who was like all of 47 at that time, gave me a look right in the eye. This was like in 1974. And he said, you know what? Sex never killed anybody. He said, I just don't want you to fall in love with this guy. Mm. And that was like, first of all, now sex can kill you. But he was just like, I don't care what you're doing. Just don't fall. Like, don't end up with this schmuck. Mm-hmm. And I broke up with the guy like the week later, where if he had said, oh, this is a star-crossed romance, we would have been Romeo and Juliet. But he looked at me with such disdain, I just don't want sex never killed anybody. I just want you to fall in love with this guy. It's like, oh, that was like the revision of one of those things again. So, and again, you never know. I'm sure he didn't rehearse that as like a story, but that's one of the things, again, I tell my students, it's like, just don't do something irrevocable. Don't go falling in love with somebody, do what you need to do, but don't, be careful. So be careful with your heart, but telling our stories, right? Telling our stories and giving ourselves credit. Sometimes that's we go around giving everybody else credit. You ever say thank you to a woman? It's like she'll sock you in the jaw. If you say thank you for doing, what are you kidding? I did nothing. My team did everything. I don't do a thing. It's just like, lady, say thank you. I don't want to stand here for 45 minutes while you give me the acknowledgements. Just say thank you. Let me know when I can do it again. That's it. It's easy. That's why women talk about sexual harassment. Men aren't afraid of talking to women in the workplace because they're afraid of sexual harassment. They don't want to hear a 45-minute explanation of why, if you say to a woman, you look very nice today, she's going to disagree with you. She's going to say, no, I hate what they did with my hair. Look what they did. I hate this part. Look, they put this, it's just, stop it. So men don't say anything anymore. They're not afraid of a lawyer. They just don't want to hear 45 minutes about your hair. To we have to stop this. We have control over this. There's a lot we don't. We don't have control over setting equal pay for equal work, and we don't have maternity leave, and we don't have equal health care and healthcare. We don't have control over all that. We have control about whether we can say thank you.
Gina, harness all of this and record it. I don't know, so we can YouTube it to people, because it's just.
I have several of my lectures are on YouTube. You can find me.
I love it.
We're recording this right now as well.
Oh,
so this will be up on the bookstore's YouTube page. So you can revisit and send it to anyone you'd like.
That's great.
The best Gina This is Anita, and I am incognito, but the best Gina YouTube is Gina doing The Night Before Christmas. Was it The Night Before Christmas or whatever that Christmas thing that you did with the Boston Pops, Gina?
Yeah,
Was it?
I did a live performance with the Boston Pops, and it was unrehearsed. And thank you. That's so nice, Anita. And that's up on YouTube. And I did my own take on The Night Before Christmas, whereas The Night Before Christmas said nothing is stirring, not even. And I said, are you kidding? This is written by a man, because this is the night before any major holiday, before Passover, before Purim, before Ramadan. I mean, she is stirring 17 pots of sauce on the stove, and she is yelling at her daughter-in-law, who's saying she's going to bring a vegan meal, and she's seeing if there's more Pinot Grigio. She is stirring in that house. But the Boston Pops folks didn't know what to expect when I got up there to do this. And again, it's in front of a live audience, a couple of thousand people. And so it's nice to see the musicians laughing. So like the first violin is laughing and the harpist is laughing because they didn't know what to expect. But the other one I like, so there's a TED Talk about women in comedy. And then it's an old favorite now. It's from a while ago, but it's called Bathing Suit Season at TJ Maxx. And do you need any more explanation? It's about going to the ritual humiliation of trying on bathing suits at TJ Maxx while wearing knee-high socks, and just what that can do to the strongest woman's sense of self. So that's also up there in a video. So
That's great. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments, anything they'd like to say? Go ahead.
I just have a comment that Julianne said that I think is really important. You said about Georgia, you don't know me, but you have had such a big effect on me. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's something that a lot of women do, and mothers, teachers, anybody, and I think that was a great comment. And I'm sure that many of the women here have had that effect on a lot of people.
I'm supposed to be running to a work flight, but I wanted to comment on that. I even reached out to some of the writers on LinkedIn because they are so inspiring. I just wanted to get their content on LinkedIn, because sometimes as a mom, you just want to read. I don't want all the fake news and crud. I want to read the good stuff in life, and mothers also create the good stuff, and women create the good stuff. We don't seem to fluff about. We just say it's black and white and this is what's good in the world. And so all of you inspire me. I just want to say that, because even a writer was in the New York Times, and it's Swedish, and I can't remember her name, I apologize, but the way she wrote that piece kind of made me think about what I do with my own work. And so when people read your content, just be aware of that. We're out there. Sometimes this world with pandemic and chaos and war doesn't make sense, but then I read something and I read your stories, they touch my heart. And then I'm like, I'm going to do better. So thank you, Gina. I have to run and catch a flight, but you guys are very inspiring.
Have a safe trip. Bon voyage.
Thank you, Gina. Bye.
Bye.
If we still have a few more minutes, I want to share a little bit of a story, like a similar story. When Gina first came to Sarasota, Florida, the first time I met her, she was speaking at the Women's Resource Center here in Sarasota as a fundraiser for the Displaced Homemaker Service in 1996. I think this is a term that we probably need to redefine nowadays, but it was women who were not having worked in their outside of their home for years and years, and then their husbands came home and said they didn't want to be married anymore and had to go ahead and get a job at age 57 or whatever. And Gina came to Sarasota, Florida to speak as a fundraiser for the Women's Resource Center, but specifically to this group of women. And her book was called Sweet Revenge: The Wicked Delights of Getting Even. And she spoke of the story in that book about Liz Carpenter, who had been the press secretary to Lady Bird Johnson, who had written a book entitled Ruffles and Flourishes. And the esteemed historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr. came up to her at an event and said, "Oh, Gina, Liz, you wrote a very good book. Who wrote it for you?" And she, without batting an eye, said, "Oh, thank you, Arthur. Who read it to you?" And that recounting that story, I was in the audience, obviously having brought Gina to Sarasota. I saw 75 women sit up straighter that day. And it was such an important thing. And I want to share that with you all because it had just a little effect, but it had a big effect. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Anita, and for introducing me to Sarasota. I never would have been to Sarasota if it wasn't for Anita and her work with the women in the community down there. It was such a big deal, and we've stayed friends all these years. But it really is. It's like learning how to come up with the answer, but then it's also the permission that you have to give yourself in your own head to answer back. And so that Liz Carpenter line is so wonderful because I tell that to groups I speak to groups of women, to groups of men. A lot of times they have me in to talk to corporate groups where there are a lot of men. That's usually after a lawsuit, but I show up and that's fine. But it's people will say, "I could never think of that in a million years." I said, you have to get rid of the editors in your head that, but people will say, even if I could think of that in a million years, I would never say it. I said, how come? I said, if I would say to somebody, "Glad you liked it, Arthur. Who read it to you?" I said, I would be up all night thinking, what if Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was secretly illiterate? What if he had a kid doing Hooked on Phonics? And then I would have to volunteer 4 nights a week for the Literacy Society of America. I tell that story, and that we have to, again, give ourselves permission, However, one group I told it to had one of the heads of the literacy volunteers for Connecticut in it and said, "We'll let you keep telling that joke, but you have to do a fundraiser for us every other year." And I'm doing it in May. And so it's like, I will tell that story, but I'm doing the fundraiser for the Literacy Volunteers of Connecticut so that, big joke, Gina, you're now doing our fundraiser. It's like, that's fine. It's for a good cause. And I tell Liz Carpenter's story. So maybe that's a good place to end. Oh.
Hi, this is Karma Lloyd. Can I break in? Thank you, Gina. And thank you, everybody. This has been very inspiring. I have been sitting here smiling for the last half of it, thinking of my Sicilian grandmother. If they could do, those immigrants, and George's immigrant grandmother too, her story about her grandmother, and Elsie, I know more about her mother. I mean, what amazing things that she did. So if those women could do what they did, we, with our huge advantages, think of what we can do. So thank you for an inspiring and entertaining presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us so much of your time, Gina. And thanks to Georgia and Elsie too. And another huge thanks to everybody who joined us today. And I think I speak for everyone when I say how inspiring it is to be in a room, albeit virtually, with so many women who champion other women in this way. It really does give this burst of energy. It's so nice. And I can't wait to read Fast Fallen Women, which reminds me that we do, before everybody goes, make sure to check out the chat box in the Zoom area. You'll see a link to buy Gina's work, straight from Bookstore One. So check that out, and then check out your inboxes later today, and you'll see a link to the YouTube video, so you can share this conversation with all of your friends, family, whoever you want to show it to.
Thank you, Bryn. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Gina.
Thank you.